Phenomenological research is a type of qualitative research that is generally less frequently used, mainly because of its peculiar uses and also because of the complexities involved in the process of this particular type of research. However, this research is quite interesting and very useful in several contexts, especially in terms of exploring deeper psychological type of issues with respect to individuals and with respect to certain groups. We have already have a lecture available on the nature and introduction to phenomenological research in this space. The current lecture is aimed at giving an example of phenomenological research for research students. So first, let us have a brief overview of what is phenomenological research. Phenomenological research is basically a qualitative research approach, the aim of which is deeper exploration and understanding of the essence of lived experiences or experiences that people have. And so we are interested in exploring those experiences or the essence of those experiences from the research participants' perspectives. The aim of phenomenological research basically is to uncover the essence or the core meaning that individuals gave to their experiences. Now, generally, phenomenological research is conducted mainly in the fields such as education, psychology, sociology, and health sciences. The important pioneers of this school of thought in philosophy and this type of research include Husserl, Heidegger, and Sartre, to name a few. Now we move on to an example, a simple example of phenomenological research from the field of education, which is like my own field. So I find it more convenient to give examples from the field of education. So for example, if you are exploring this topic, an exploration of the experiences of long-term victims of bullying in school settings. So if you are interested in conducting a phenomenological studies on the experiences of the victims of bullying in school contexts, this is something that you will explore, that you can explore through the use of phenomenological research. Now, for example, relevant to this topic, we have certain questions. And so we are interested in finding answers to these questions, which are, you can say, are phenomenological in their nature. So the first question is, how do students who have been long-term victims of bullying describe their experiences? Or in other words, how do these students feel about their experiences of being bullied over a period of time or long period? Now, secondly, what emotional, psychological, and social impact do long-term bullying experiences have on students? So as we know that bullying is a form of harassment, you can say. And as a result, students who pass through this experience can have emotional, psychological, and social impact on their personality. So the phenomenological researcher is interested in knowing about or exploring these from the perspectives of those victims. Thirdly, how do students perceive their coping mechanisms? So generally, victims of bullying try to cope with the process of bullying from which they are actually suffering. So what coping strategies or mechanisms they use, and what support, if there is any, they receive, or what type of support they actually want that is not available to them. So these are like three important questions related to exploring this phenomena of bullying in the school context. Now, research methodology generally, as we said in the beginning, phenomenological studies or studies that are interested in exploring phenomenological type of questions, they use qualitative research designs. So generally, research methodology, the research paradigm will be based on interpretivism, that is the philosophy behind qualitative research, and we will take phenomenological positioning because we know that there are various types of interpretive research designs or research philosophies. Now, the research design will generally be qualitative, but we can also make use of a subtype of qualitative. For example, we can combine the phenomenological underpinnings of the research with, for example, case study, or maybe in some cases with ethnography and something like that. Now, sampling. Generally, as we are interested in phenomenological research, we are interested in in-depth exploration. So generally, samples are purposive and samples are smaller because we want to explore the phenomena in depth. Generally, from 10 to 15, for example, in this case, it will be useful to select 10 to 15 high school students who self-identify, for example, as long-term victims of bullying. So in your first stage, you can identify those who consider them as victims of long-term bullying. And so long-term victims actually means that they're defined as persistent bullying lasting 6 months or more, or maybe years. There should also be inclusion criteria, which actually in this case, because secondary school students, so students aged between 15 and 18 could be included in this sample, and they should be victims of bullying across various forms. So as we know that bullying has different forms. Bullying could be verbal, it could be physical, and it could be relational, it could be psychological, it could be direct, or it could be through the use of cyber systems or online bullying. So whatever form or forms we are interested in, we will include the participant based on that criteria. Generally, sample could be uniform, for example, across gender, or selecting victims from one gender or another gender, or there could be variation. So that depends on what we are interested in. Some researchers might be interested in exploring this issue from a sample that has more uniformity in terms of characteristics, and there will be others who might want variation in terms of the sample. So that depends on your research question and objectives. Generally, the data collection methods that we use in phenomenological studies include in-depth interviews or semi-structured interviews, because we are interested in the details or perspectives or perceptions or feelings of the participants. That is why generally these semi-structured interviews will be longer, ranging from 30 minutes to 90. In some cases, it could be a few hours as well. In some cases, it could be more than once. The interviews could be conducted more than once. Now, here are some key questions for this particular example or for this particular topic. For example, we can ask the participants, how would you describe your experiences of being bullied over a period of time, for example? Second, in what ways did bullying affect you emotionally and socially or physically, whatever is like the focus of our study? How did you cope during and after these experiences of bullying? And what role did teachers, peers, and family members play during this time? Again, these are not fixed questions. there is flexibility in terms of the questions, as is the case generally with semi-structured interviews. So you can include questions, you can exclude questions, you can add prompts and probes into your questions depending on the kind of information that is that you are getting. We could also make use of reflective journals. In many cases, we can ask the participants to write their journals, to document their thoughts and feelings in the form of journals or diaries, and then we can use that data for analysis. And in some cases, we can also make use of focus groups or small supportive group discussions. Remember that in phenomenological studies, generally we are interested in kind of personal, sensitive type of information. That is why generally the use of focus group should be restricted or optional, because then there could be compromise on the privacy or anonymity or ethical considerations of your research. So we need to make sure that when we are making use of the focus groups in our phenomenological studies, there is no compromise on ethical considerations. Now, once we get the data from the participants, the next stage is data analysis. So generally, because it's generally textual data and it's detailed data, what we need to do is to generally use the qualitative data analysis processes, which include transcriptions, where interviews are transcribed from, for example, from audio to text form. Then we reduce data in line with our objectives. We code data, so naming, encoding, and selecting relevant chunks related to areas of our interest. And so we use thematic analysis, develop themes based on our analysis. For example, in this case, we can develop themes such as emotional distress, social isolation, and coping strategies. And similarly, the role of the school systems or the role of other individuals in terms of their impact on the process and outcomes of bullying. So those will be some of the main themes that we can get through this study. And we need to then have critical analysis as researchers so that we can identify the essence of the themes, or what we actually get towards the end. What do we conclude from the themes that we get through the analysis of our data? So this is the general process of data analysis in phenomenological studies. We also need to be conscious about the ethical considerations, because our research, like other studies, especially phenomenological studies, should be based on ethical considerations. So the first one is informed consent. We need to obtain consent from our students or our participants in this case. And if the students are minor, for example, in some cases, we need to get permission or consent from their parents and guardians. Then anonymity and confidentiality are important considerations. We need to, for example, to keep the participant anonymous, we might use pseudonyms, and we can protect the participants' identities. Similarly, we need to give them support system. In some cases, phenomenological studies, as I said, revolve around the discussion of sensitive personal experiences and issues. That is why the participants can go through certain emotional statuses where they can suffer psychologically or emotionally. So we need to have this in mind, to have access, to have them access to counseling and support services during and after the study. And another thing that is related to this is to minimize the distress, possible distress. So conducting interviews, we need to conduct interviews in safe and supportive environment, and we need to stop or pause when we feel that the participants are stressed or they do not want to share further. Generally, the outcomes of phenomenological studies, and in this case as well, is first of all, deeper understanding of, for example, the emotional, the psychological, and the social impact of long-term bullying among students. So that's one of the possible outcomes that you can say, hypothesize in the beginning. We can also have better insights into the coping mechanisms, or in other words, how actually victims cope with psychological stresses, emotional disturbances, or the physical and mental problems that could arise as a result of bullying. And lastly, as a result of this study, we could recommend to educators, counselors, and policymakers to improve, for example, anti-bullying interventions, to create awareness related to bullying in schools, and to develop support systems that can help victims deal with the incidents and the experiences of bullying in schools. So this is a simple example of phenomenological studies in an educational context. Of course, because phenomenological studies could be conducted in various fields, including psychology, sociology, law, medical sciences, nursing. So we could have examples of these in other fields as well.